So if a global pandemic didn't already make things chaotic enough at LaSalle, we have some news that we need to relay to you. Hello, I'm Siobhan Nolan.
And I'm Tyler Small. The leads are not the only thing changing on 20th and Olney, as some big changes are coming to the LaSalle Athletics Department. You're watching LaSalle TV's home for Explorer Athletics SportsLine.
Welcome to SportsLine. Although there have been new coaches hired, schedules released, and transfers added to rosters, we have to begin by relaying the unfortunate message delivered to the LaSalle community on Tuesday, September 29th. University President Colleen Hanisch has announced that the LaSalle University Athletics Department will be shrinking from 25 varsity sports to 18. The following athletic programs were included in the downsizing: baseball, men's swimming and diving, men's tennis, men's water polo, softball, volleyball, and women's tennis. These sports will compete this academic year if the current conditions of the pandemic allow. This move, according to the email from President Hanisch, this action will provide a better overall experience for LaSalle's remaining student athletes and create a more sustainable environment for the university's athletics department. This measure better aligns us with members of the Atlantic 10 Conference, which on average sponsor 19 intercollegiate athletic teams. The NCAA average is 18 teams.
Okay, so kind of just to give a little bit of a layout to this episode, because it is going to be very different. Obviously, we didn't have top three to start. We have no recaps, of course, as we have in the first two episodes.
Yeah.
But for a public service announcement, I'll call it, we know pretty much nothing about all this. We know just about as much as you who received the email, and it is a very complex situation. And we're going to take a look at it from the athletic side, and for the unfortunate athletes that will not be able to conclude their 4 years, and we'll take a look at some of the best moments from last season from those sports.
Mm-hmm.
But just to kind of emphasize at the beginning, we don't know the situation. We're not judging the situation because we know so little about it all.
Exactly.
We are just here to relay what the athletes would hopefully want us to be saying.
Yeah, because, all we know is what we got in the email, just like everyone else got. So, we just want to be able to report as accurately as we can with the little information that we do have. So we're just working with what we've got right now.
Yeah, so with that, we're going to go right into it and talk about what I just talked about. To commemorate the sports that we will unfortunately be losing, we are going to highlight all 7. Let's start with baseball. The Explorers baseball team is coming off an exciting 2019 season where they finished 25-31 overall, where 17 of their victories came at Hank Vincent Field. Some of the top moments of the season included their 7-5 win at home against Rhode Island, where senior reliever Connor Hinchliff tied the single-season save record with 13. Hinchliff followed the season when signed with the Philadelphia Phillies organization, where he became the 3rd drafted player in LaSalle history. Another top moment came on April 2nd when freshman catcher Tatum Levins hit 3 home runs in a rout of Lehigh on the road, 14-6. Or how could we forget March 30th, where another freshman, Nick DeVitro, hit the go-ahead grand slam in the top of the 11th against the Bonnies for their first A-10 win of the young season. The Explorers have 31 members of the roster who will unfortunately not play the 4 season that they initially expected.
Next, we'll talk about men's swimming and diving, who in the abbreviated 2020 season finished 5-4, where as a team, they won their last 4 events. The Explorers last season were highlighted by a terrific senior day at Kirk Pool on January 25th against Seton Hall. At this event, the 2 seniors, Christoph Ross and Norm Gregory, highlighted their send-off as Ross won both the 100 and 200 breast, where Gregory took gold in the 200 free, while also finishing runner-up in the 50 and 100 free. This group made a point of breaking records in their time at LaSalle, as 8 individual records and 1 relay record was broken in the past 2 years. 15 male swimmers and divers will not complete 4 seasons at LaSalle.
The men's and women's tennis teams will be next. As their abbreviated seasons, the men's team finished 3-7 in the 2019-2020 season, I should say. However, when they have won, they won in a commanding fashion. They beat U Science's 6-1 as Fenjiro, Gonzalez, Merrill, Sanchez, Caban, and Lucius all won their singles matches. The only performance to top this would be their final match of the season, unexpectedly, of course, against St. Francis Brooklyn. 5 of the 6 Explorers won their singles matches, and the duo of Gonzalez and Merrill and Caban and Lucius were victorious. On the women's end, they may have never secured a team victory in their 7 matches on the season. However, they were heating up at the right time, as Ali Snyder and Alexis Nikolic won their final match of the season for the season-leading total in points scored for a game. The women's side will have 3 athletes, and the men's side will have 6 athletes, missing out on a full tenure with the Explorers.
Men's water polo will be next on the list as they tied their program record in wins this past season. Their highlight of the season easily came at Navy, where the Explorers won a back-and-forth contest 10-8, courtesy of Luke Waitcheter, who found the back of the net twice. This would also be the team's first victory against a Division I program in their brief history. There will be 15 Explorers impacted by the decision.
Next, we will go 2 flights of steps above Kirkpool as volleyball will unfortunately face its final season in 2020-2021. In 2019, the team had a phenomenal season, finishing 15-14 in the regular season and 8-6 in the A10. The Explorers had some really exciting regular season games, including the incredible home victory against the Villanova Wildcats when they came back from a 2-0 deficit, where the Explorers won in the 5th set 18-16. Another top moment of the season was when Catherine Woods set the all-time assist record on Senior Day against St. Louis. In this effort, Woods was named Setter of the Year in the Atlantic 10 for the 2nd consecutive season. But above all else came their top moment of the season in the quarterfinal matchup against the A10 in the A10 playoffs against George Washington. Devin Cora, totaling 14 kills and 3 blocks, and Elizabeth Osborne's 10 kills and 4 aces led the way for a 3-0 win. 11 Explorers will conclude their tenure for the LaSalle Athletics without a full 4 years.
Lastly, we go to softball, where in 2019, the Explorers saw a lot of excitement from the Bats in their 12-win season. The Explorers totaled 157 runs in 45 games for a whopping 3.49 runs in a game. Some names to thank for these exciting games are Kaylee Joyce, who led the team in homers with 7 and OPS with a .903. Not far behind was Emma Schweigert, who posted a .299 average, and Emily Conway, who led the team with 12 doubles and 71 total bases. The pitching deserves recognition too, as Kaylee Joyce also did it in the circle, as she posted a 4.32 ERA over 168 and 2/3 innings pitched. The Explorers will be losing 16 athletes.
So now we're going to ad-lib a little bit just about some of our personal moments, some things we want to commemorate and highlight. Siobhan, I'll start it off with you, but I just wanted to say that I think of all these personally, with a little bit of bias, I think volleyball is going to be the one I miss most, just because they were such an electric group to watch, and they were at the best that I think they've been in a very long time going into this with the A10 quarterfinal win.
Yeah, for me, men's swimming and diving is going to be a big loss. For the collegiate, I would write a lot about them. It just seemed like every competition they had, they would be breaking records, or someone would just put in a really strong performance, come in the top 3. So they just consistently were doing so well and winning so many things and just representing LaSalle really well in all their competitions. So that'll be a big loss for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another one we have to talk about, let's talk about both baseball and softball. Baseball, we still unfortunately have not gotten to see. We got to see 3 games with them on the new field.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously going to be a lot of fun seeing them at Hank DeVincent. They were having a big time. I mean, still, Hinchliff getting drafted is just one of the most coolest feelings I have from covering LaSalle athletics, is for somebody to make it into the pros. So that was obviously very exciting.
Yeah, and that just goes to show you how much talent is in that baseball team. We talked a lot about them last year too, but just knowing that LaSalle athletes can get drafted into that highest level, especially for the Phillies, like the hometown team, that's just a really big source of pride for me, definitely.
Exactly, because nobody really talks about any baseball talent coming from the Northeast, and softball talent at the same time, because softball this season, of course, we're still hoping to get this last season with these athletes. However, softball looked like it was going to have one of the most improved seasons they've had yet, because they
Absolutely.
obviously had the offense, like you talked about, where they were averaging over 3.5 runs per game. They
Mhm.
needed help with the pitching. I mean, Kaylee Joyce doing it from both sides of both in the circle and in the box was
Very
huge for the
impressive.
Explorers. However, they just signed 4 separate pitchers, so they had a lot of depth coming into the season. It should
Mhm.
be a lot of fun if they do have this season, and I really hope that they do, because all these sports really deserve to have a proper send-off if it is the final year.
Oh, absolutely. And so many of these sports were going to have really improved seasons. I think that a lot of us were really excited for them. There was just so much good news coming out of athletics, even in the midst of this pandemic where no one was really sure what was going to happen. So, it's kind of disappointing to think that we might not be able to see all of that come together when there just seemed to be so much positive improvement happening.
Exactly, exactly. And another one for positive improvement. Although both men's and women's tennis were really gutted with some of the losses they had senior wise, and they're one of the most depleted programs. They're only losing 9 players that unfortunately won't get to finish out their tenure with the Explorers. However, they were still a lot of fun to watch, and they had some really exciting victories. Obviously, the women's had a very short season, of course. The men's got a total of 9 matches in, but the women only got about 4. So who knows what would have happened if they'd given them a full season. But in years past, it was just an exciting group, and it was an underappreciated sport
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Explorers fans. And we also hope the best for all of them.
Yeah, and I want to, I guess, give a shout out to water polo because they haven't been around that long, but last season was really their big breakout season, and they had a lot of exciting players. They were getting all of these really crucial victories to get their momentum going. So it is kind of sad to see them get cut after such a brief history, but again, we just wish everybody the best and hope that they can continue with their athletic career in some capacity.
Of course, I mean, getting their first Division One win it's a huge deal. I mean, for the coaching staff, of course, because he finally got to see, because he does both sides, men's and women's.
Mhm.
It's just that was a huge moment, especially because it did not come against a slob. University of Navy. I mean, that is
Yeah,
a huge victory for them. All your water
absolutely.
puns aside, but a
Mhm.
10-8 victory. It was a very gritty performance, and who knows what the future would have held. And we get to see them one more time, of course.
Mhm.
Hopefully, with everything, hopefully going as well as it has been so far. But
Yeah,
we can only hope the best for them as well.
absolutely. I can't help but feel kind of personally responsible for that because all of this started happening when I came on as co-host. The pandemic, now this.
I mean,
So
we haven't talked about a real sport since you've been on here.
that's very true. So my sincerest apologies to our audience and everyone at SportsLine for that.
Earlier this week, we got a chance to sit down with Ed LaFerge from LaSalle Athletics to talk about both the updates to the Go Explorers website and the new podcast brought to you by Go Explorers, Inside the L. Check it out on this week's edition of On the Sidelines. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of On the Sideline. Today, Siobhan and I are joined by Ed LaFerge from LaSalle Athletics. Ed, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate you giving me the time.
Of course. So we're going to dive right into it. Ed had a big change in the LaSalle Athletics department because with no sports going on, they've definitely stayed busy. One with updating the website for Go Explorers, which Siobhan and I definitely have to thank you for because it makes getting our stories and everything a lot easier, a lot more laid out.
Mhm.
And we welcome in a new podcast, Inside the L is what it's called. You can find it on all the platforms, right? Spotify, Apple Music, all that.
Yep, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We post it to YouTube as well. So all 3 of those platforms, all you need to do is search LaSalle Athletics, and you'll find that on those platforms.
Great. Great. So let's start there. What was the thought process like to pitch this idea or to get a podcast rolling for LaSalle Athletics?
Yeah, so this is something that I've been at the university now for 2 years. I'm starting my 3rd year, and it's something that I've been thinking about, and we've had some discussions behind the scenes about for the full 2 years that I've been here. And finally, we were really waiting on the right opportunity for it to be appropriate to start it, and given quarantine and how everything's gone and sports being postponed, for this fall semester, we thought it was best to, now might be the best time to go ahead and start it. And so, we really look for it to be something that gives folks the behind the scenes look, right? And so on our first episode, we bring, Brian Baptiste, our athletic director, in, and we go back to that week of the men's basketball tournament in March, and how quick that decision was made to pull the plug and on that tournament, and subsequently the rest of the spring season. And we just really want fans to feel like they're a part of things, and that they can understand why decisions were made and kind of how some of the thought processes went into place to make some of the decisions that get made. And we have a lot of staff in our department, and a lot of coaches and student athletes and alumni who have really cool stories, and we want to be able to tell those stories, and the podcast gives us a really good platform to do that.
Yeah, and so we just got that email from Dr. Hanish about how we're planning on going back for the spring semester. So what kind of stuff are you planning to have on the podcast should sports, hopefully fingers crossed, return to normal playing schedules?
Yeah, so it's funny that you ask. We actually had some discussions this morning about some of this. So what's going to happen is our next episode, and I'll give you guys a little insight information here. Our next episode is going to feature some of our coaches and what it's been like for them to return to campus and return to practices on campus. And so some of our Olympic sports are doing that this week. So we'll kind of get the inside scoop from the coaches about what that's been like and what it's been like to be back on campus. And then we'll have the opportunity sometime in November to speak with both of our basketball coaches, men's head coach Ashley Howard and women's head coach Mountain McGilvery, to kind of preview their season and see what this whole process has been like for them to be practicing and gearing up for a season in unprecedented times, where there was times where they're practicing without their full team together, and they're really only focused in on maybe a couple kids at a time working out together. So those are some things that you're going to see over the next month or so. In terms of what it's going to look like come springtime, I mean, who knows? Anything is really on the table. We're going to do our best to, highlight all 25 of our programs and show off the different things that they've been doing, that they're looking to do. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for the spring semester, with as crazy as it's going to be with 25 sports competing all, during the same 4 or 5 month period. So we're looking forward to the different things that we'll be able to do then.
Yeah. So kind of going off that point, actually, the possibility of 25 sports playing at one time gets both Shimon and I excited, but that must be a lot of work for all of you guys. So you usually section it off for people specifying in a certain athletic field. Any idea how that process would be like? Would it just be hiring on new people, or bringing on just 5 sports for one person? What do you think that'll be like?
Well, so within our office, we all have our designated sport assignments. So for example, I'm the sports contact for women's basketball, women's soccer, softball, men's and women's golf. Right. And so what's really going to happen, it's going to be an all hands on deck approach, right? We have a great office and great folks on staff in our office who will help make sure that we get everything done that needs to get done. I mean, we don't know the format of things necessarily right now, of who's going to play when, and schedules are still being put together and figured out how everything's going to work. So, once everything's figured out and we know who's playing when and what schedules are going to look like, we're all going to make it work, and we'll all step up and do what we need to do to make it happen.
Yeah, and you have Brian Baptiste. You're planning on having the coaches on. Do you plan on in the future getting any of the student athletes on to talk about their personal experiences, to kind of give that more relatability to the students listening to the podcast?
Definitely. So we're hoping come probably the start, maybe sometime in January, depending on when the semester starts and when athletic competitions start, we do hope to get some of our student athlete representatives from the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, the executive board from that group of student athletes. And then, where it calls for it, we'll certainly have student athletes maybe who, have a significant story to tell, or maybe who's a student athlete who's having a great season, and we'll bring them on to talk. it's really more feature-esque, right? And so we're not trying to, opposite of kind of what you guys do, we're not trying to give updates on the podcast on, women's soccer won 2-0, men's soccer won 3-1, whatever. We're trying to give more of those behind the scenes feature story type interviews to really give fans and listeners that behind the scenes in-depth feel.
Great. So talking a little bit about Brian Baptiste being a part of it so far, he's been in the first 2 episodes. How big of an impact has he made? Is he planning on being on more episodes coming in the future? Does he enjoy being on? I'm sure he does because he's been on the first 2. What has it been like working with him?
Yeah, I mean, Brian's great. I mean, he's been a huge advocate and support for our office to do some really great things. And, we all can't thank him enough for, being a support for us and giving us the opportunity to do some of these, social initiatives that we're doing. Brian, actually, when we first started talking about it, he was like, wow, this is great. Like, I'm a huge podcast guy, like super interested in this. And he listens to a ton of podcasts. So, knowing that he supported it and was interested in it, it only made sense for us to have him on. And I think if time permitted for everybody, I think Brian would love to jump on as many episodes as he can to, just be in touch with the LaSalle community. I think all in all, he's really supportive of it and he really enjoys it. And I would not be surprised if you see Brian on some more episodes in the future.
And, obviously you want to give that big behind the scenes look. So how much do you focus on, because Brian Baptiste shared some personal anecdotes from his own experience, but how much do you want to get into that personal aspect of the people on the podcast and give that more human approach to seeing these people more than an athletics director or just a coach or athlete, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a big part of what we want to do is we want people to really understand who the person is that we're talking to, right? We don't want them just to be seen as, Paul Royal, the head women's soccer coach, right? We want to know about Paul Royal as a person and really take people behind the scenes. And I know I keep saying that phrase, but that's really the goal of what we're trying to do, right? So, seeing those personal anecdotes kind of come to life and for us to be able to kind of spread that message and, take people behind the scenes, maybe we'll come to the point where, we'll have a coach or a student athlete on and talk about a specific game-winning play or something and kind of maybe what the coach's thought process was in calling that play or, the student athlete and why you didn't, take the shot. Instead, you passed it off for the game-winning assist or something. So we want our student athletes and our coaches to feel comfortable and to be able to tell those stories as, they see fit.
And I'm actually going to ask something kind of similar, but this time going with the alumni from the athletics program. Now,
Sure.
We know how strong our alumni program is. You go to any basketball game and you'll see half of them there. How much do you want to kind of bring this podcast possibly back towards memory lane, looking at some of the top highlights through LaSalle, whether in interviews or just storytelling, like a this day in history thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, if anybody's listened to our first 2 episodes, I mean, I think we had 2 really notable alumni on and, in the first episode, Krista Plummer-Lawson, who is a track and field and cross country alumni, she's a nurse at Einstein, just 2 blocks from campus, and she's battling the the COVID-19 pandemic on the front line. So it was really fitting for us to have her on because she could talk about her time as a student athlete and especially with both men's and women's cross country winning the Atlantic 10 championship last fall. She was able to talk about her time, her experience as a student athlete. And then she was also able to talk to us about, her time as a nurse battling the pandemic on the front lines. In episode 2, we had BJ Johnson, who's, one of the most notable men's basketball alumni right now. And, he was able to talk being in the NBA bubble and talk about the social injustice issues going on in the country. And we talked about LaSalle and what kind of brought him to LaSalle, because he originally was up at Syracuse and transfers to LaSalle. And so we talked to him about that process. And so it's really great for us to have the opportunity to connect with our alumni and showcase their stories, not only their life at LaSalle, but kind of what they've done after LaSalle and to show what a LaSalle degree can do and what the experience that they receive at LaSalle can do for them in their career and their path moving forward.
Yeah, and kind of going off what Tyler said, you have that mix of the alumni, the coaches, the athletes. How important is that to have that accessibility to all sorts of people, older people that might have already graduated from LaSalle, current students that are attending it, and then maybe even students that are looking to attend LaSalle in the future? So how important is that to get all of those different perspectives in your podcast episodes?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very important. I mean, that's why each episode has an alumni spotlight series, right? We want to hear from our alumni. We want to know what they're doing. We want them to know that we're proud of them for everything that they've accomplished as a professional. And we also like to talk about their time at LaSalle and hear how that's impacted them moving forward. We're going to do our best to mix up the guests that we have, right? It's not all going to be administrators. It's not all going to be coaches. It's not all going to be student athletes. You're going to hear from an alumni every single episode. There may be episodes where the main guest of the podcast is an alumni, while also hearing from another alumni on the alumni spotlight. So, we have a lot of flexibility with kind of how we structure the podcast. But it's really important that we at some point hear from all of those different voices, because all of those voices make up the LaSalle community. And we're all proud to be a part of the LaSalle community. And so it's really important that we hear from different voices amongst the community.
Well, that's great. And like I said earlier, Inside the L on all podcasting platforms, you'll be able to see those voices from the LaSalle community, and you'll be able to hear Ed as well. So Ed, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So with that, we'll send it back to the desk.
That just about wraps it up for us this week. If you can't make it out to see the Explorer Report, be sure to tune in next week for our coverage. Keep up with LaSalle sports by visiting goexplorers.com.
Also, check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/LaSalleTV and on Twitter and Instagram at SportsLineLTV. We welcome you to send your thoughts and suggestions there.
So for everyone at LaSalle and our SportsLine team, I'm Siobhan Nolan.
And I'm Tyler Small. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the game.